I'm so thrilled to be here, and I deeply appreciate the museum's invitation and the opportunity to, Lucy and I have talked a lot in public and in private, and the opportunity to talk with you here in this very unique place and to witness this amazing exhibition. And when I was moving through it the other day, I thought, this is like an artist's retrospective. You know, only it's different in one way. It's relationship. It's all about the people she knew. And it's in various places. And it's so interesting to me as a kind of manifestation of who Lucy is and sort of what she's accomplished with her life. And so let's just, I know what you want to hear about is that stuff that she's got over there. So Dr. Lippard.
I'm not a doctor. That was my daddy.
No, but that's those honorary doctorates. Now you get to call yourself doctor. So tell me something about some of the things in that exhibition. Do you have any particular thing that comes to mind?
No.
Okay.
But I will tell you that, I mean, I don't call it a collection for a very good reason. I bought maybe 2 of those things. Or maybe, I think only one is in the show, and it was Harmony Hammond's bag, which I visited her in New York and when she first came, and she had a baby, and I was a single mother too, and she had a beautiful piece, and it was cheap, so I bought it anyway. But that's pretty much it. And most of this stuff comes from, like Suzanne said, relationships. I mean, not deep relationships, a lot of people, but people I knew and so on. And people say, oh my God, how did you get a LeWitt and Andrea Ryman and so on? Well, I came up with these people. I mean, we were all unknown when we started out, and some people made it and some people didn't. Usually it's a curious process how that happens, because I have friends who are artists who should have been famous and weren't, and friends who are famous and shouldn't have been. So. But the stuff itself, I mean, my son is an artist, and there's a piece by him in there, which makes me very pleased. And he came to it very late because he was damned if he was going to be in the family business. It was his father, his stepmother, and his 2 half-brothers are all artists, and then it was me. And when he was in his early 40s, he called me and he said, guess what I'm doing? And he after a career in acting and then hip-hop or gangster rap, actually, and then he's an artist. Thank goodness. So
you know, it's interesting. I also think at that point in time, artists gave each other work a lot. Yeah. I have free artwork from Judy Chicago, Faith Wilding. I did buy a Faith Ringgold for very little money. So I think people were different. I mean, the market was different, and people were different about their ability to give work away. I think it's very different now.
Is it really different? I'm so out of the art world, I don't know.
Get a lot of, I get some, but not a lot of people trying to give me art.
Well, it also looks like I was being bribed all over the place.
Well, you were a writer, and they did want.
Yes,
right.
But this was usually people I'd already written on. I wrote a catalog on Ad Reinhardt when I was still in my 20s. And I was so pleased to be asked to do this. It was at the Jewish Museum for some reason. Ad was not Jewish. But he said, well, I had to give Sam Hunter, who was the director of the museum, I had to give him something, so I guess I have to give you something. And I said, no, you don't have to give me. So he gave me a bunch of prints. But Ad was wonderful and had a great sense of humor, and then we carried on like that.
What I like about your collection that isn't a collection is that it's so complicated, diverse. It's got so many different kind of people, and I found myself going around saying, oh, I remember so-and-so. What are they doing now?
Yeah.
You know,
they're dead, probably.
Yeah, they're getting rid. That is a problem when you hit your 80s. So let's go on, because I think we'll return to this, and you guys may have some special things that you want to ask her about at the end of this.
But I should say, just before we finish, that when I went around to the show, which I finally saw 2 days ago, or yesterday, I guess it was, really, because I couldn't see it at the opening. I thought, did I have that? Where was that? Everything, I had a small loft, and the walls were brick and stuff, and for the most part, they were under the bed. I mean, some of these things I feel like I'm seeing for the first time. It's terrible, but I said, oh, really? Did I ever have that?
I visited that loft many times, and not only did she have it under the bed, but she had a room dedicated to clothes, most of which were hanging on the wall, but some of which ended up on the floor. And I used to bring her clothes because we're sort of the same size.
In fact, this was a hand-me-down from Suzanne.
I think it's coming back in, actually. So
she never gave me art, she gave me clothes.
Actually, I'm sitting here going through this thing and thinking, I didn't give her work. Why did I not give people art?
Well, you didn't make objects. I mean,
that was, probably why, right? But I gave clothes. I give a lot of clothes away. But tell me let's talk a little bit about feminism, because we felt at I was in the Women's Building in LA teaching at that time. I'd gone to CalArts, and we there in the Women's, and Lucy was a good friend of Judy Chicago's, who actually brought me into the arts, away from a profitable career as a doctor. But
she still gives a lot of medical advice.
I do. I do, and I read those Lancet things. But at any rate, Judy had introduced us all to who Lucy was, and of course everybody had read her books, and at least the ones about women and feminism, and we really saw her as a very important icon. So when did you become a feminist?
Well, we talked about this the other day, but we all thought we were one of the boys. And it didn't occur to me to identify with women, frankly. I mean, because women were not, they were dissed, they were not respected, and so I thought, I must be one of the boys. And then I went to Spain in 1970 and wrote a novel, a very experimental novel, which I'd been wanting to do. And it had characters in it, and one of them was vaguely autobiographical, and I thought, oh, I'm a woman. I mean, it sounds ridiculous now, but it really came through writing. And then I came back to New York and fell into Faith Ringgold and Poppy Johnson and Brenda Miller, who were just starting something called Ad Hoc Women Artists, and so I was the fourth person involved in that. And then we started protesting the Whitney, and which was the annual in those days, and it had very few women in it. So we, with the help of some men, I have to say, we projected images of women on the facade of the Whitney, the older Whitney, the one on whatever, Madison Avenue, whatever it is. Anyway, and that whole activism thing started with them. And then we did one of the fun things we did was a fake docent tour. So none of us were very well dressed, but we got well dressed, and we'd stand around and we'd have a little group of people around us, and then other people would join us, and we would give a feminist take on the show. And at the opening, we had these things and we had a generator outdoors, and we had to plug it in, and there was a gallery next door, and I ran racing into the gallery and up the stairs, and I said, do you mind if I plug this in? And they thought, well, I think that's a critic. And so I plugged the thing in, and then we had the images. And Faith Ringgold had the bright idea of having whistles in the hall, in the stairwells. So we would get into the stairwells all the time the show was up and whistle like real whistles. And the guards would come running, and we had a lot of fun doing this.
Yeah, I loved all of that. And we were busy in LA probably around the same time doing.
Well, you were ahead of us, really. I mean, well, not the Women's Building per se, but Judy.
Yeah, Judy started in, 1968 or 9? Anybody out here know their history? I'm from California. I don't think about history a lot, which is one real big difference
between us. They have no history.
Memory, history, I don't know. But we were the one thing that you probably would have related to was when Sheila de Bretteville they had all these vaginal sprays coming out, and she made these pink stickers that said, "Your vagina smells fine now naturally." And we went all over town sticking them on so we did things like that, but a lot of I think mine and Leslie's in particular, our work turned toward protesting the silences of rape, violence, that sort of thing. So violence, for those of you who may not have been part of that movement, really came out during the 70s out of feminist consciousness raising groups. Before that, it wasn't really a political issue. So I remember when you guys did, was it No More Nice Girls or the Carnival Knowledge?
Well, I didn't do those, but Carnival Knowledge was mostly with Franklin Furnace. No More Nice Girls was, I think Marcia Tucker did a show called No More Nice Girls.
No, that was even before. There was a group called that.
But I went to the women's building that was where...
Right. And yeah, that's where I was going, actually. In LA, she was an idol to us, and she came to the women's building. There was a conference, and you did a talk. I don't remember.
I just remember there was a cake that said "We Love Lucy" or something.
Oh,
and I have pictures in the show. There's a picture, slides thing of me cutting the cake.
Yeah, see, I don't remember that, but I was there, and that is actually where we met.
Yeah.
We sort of became friends later at Judy Chicago, the opening of her dinner party in 1978. Or something like that.
I don't know.
In San Francisco. There's no historians in here? Yeah. No, you don't know?
Anyway.
Okay, never mind. But at any rate, 79, I think, it opened, and I was doing a piece called The International Dinner Party, and I asked women all over the world to have dinner on exactly the same evening as the opening and send me telegrams. So it was a sort of a sneak reference to some of the critique that Judy was getting around who was depicted at the table at the dinner party. So we had well over 2,000 women from all over the world, and I met Lucy that day, and I had to go out and get a jacket.
We're not going to get back into the shopping thing, are we?
Yeah, we are. So we love to laugh together, and that's been, I think, the real foundation of our relationship, along with other shared, political interests. But we went shopping and laughed, as I recall, the entire time. And I wanted her to buy something. I'm not sure why. I just thought it would be fun to buy something together. So she got this very cute little pink blouse, a pink silk blouse, as I recall.
I don't know whatever happened to it.
Or taffeta. Yeah, I think you probably threw it away after. The next day I introduced her by saying, we're all intimidated by Lucy Lippard because she's such a great figure and she's so important to all of us as feminists. And but I want to tell you, I've had the best time with her. Yesterday, for example, we went shopping for some clothes, and she got the cutest little pink blouse at Macy's. And she spent the first 5 minutes of her talk explaining that she bought her clothes on Canal Street.
Oh, no, in thrift shops.
On Canal Street.
Or hand-me-downs from my friends.
Yes. So,
in fact, I have several friends who were right here.
So when you were in LA and you began to get a sense of the scene there, and you did probably come back more than once. You knew what was going on through Judy.
Yeah, Judy and I would meet at various places where we were both speaking and stuff and strategize.
Yeah, and so what do you think,
But I had known Judy in the late 50s in New York, and I worked at the Museum of Modern Art in the library, and I was a page in the library, and I could get my friends in free but if they took the elevator that went up to the offices instead of having to pay. So all my friends came in through that, and Judy's then husband was a writer and came more often than Judy did, but we both lived on the Lower East Side, and then we didn't see each other for years, and she moved to California, and then I think we re-met at that guy's wedding who was the head of the Hartford Museum. Anyway, never mind.
So what do you think was some of the similarities and differences in what was going on in LA and what was going on in New York? Because there weren't a lot of other places. I think Minneapolis had
Well, when we started Web, we got places all over the place. West East Bag, and that was Judy and I were. I did a show in April '71 of women. It may have been the first second wave women's show in a museum, but it was in a very small museum, in the Aldrich Museum, which now is fancier than it was then. And Larry Aldrich didn't like women particularly. He certainly didn't like feminists, but he had a great curator, Dorothy, somebody who got this going and everything. But
yeah, I remember when they had it at Collatz, the East-West Coast bag thing.
Well, so we started this thing, and I said, well, let's call it East-West Coast bag. And Judy said, why do you always have to be first? And then we realized West-East bag spelled web, which was much nicer idea, and so on. So we started. And what we did was we just contacted any city we knew about a woman in, I mean, including the South and all over the place. And my later very close friend Ellen Lanyon is in Chicago. Somebody said, "Oh, that's Ellen's kind of bag." So we just started this newsletter and had people. It was a very half-assed newsletter, so it came out now and then, and we got women all over the country going about feminism and doing shows. And the Southern women were funny. They said, "Well, here women it's all about art. Women are art here. It's the men we need to like." Oh God!
I did a project in New Orleans and ran smack dab into. Remember when the Women's Caucus for the Arts couldn't decide whether they should boycott a non-ratified ERA state or whether they should go. And the women in New Orleans wanted WCA to come down. And so I did a project with a bunch of WCA people where we stayed in other women's houses. We basically didn't participate in the economy of New Orleans, but we went to support the women. And then there was another group of women from Women's Caucus for the Arts that stayed in Washington, D.C. and said, well, we're going to boycott. And they basically took my idea for making the whole conference into a performance. And I bet you were at that. Were you at that big dinner? I think I was,
yeah, because I was partly raised in New Orleans.
Right.
So, yeah.
And there was that giant dinner in the old Mint.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
But you know, what we didn't get into really is the differences between the West Coast and the East Coast.
Yeah.
And there were big differences. I mean, most of the friends that we started with were minimalists. I mean, they were not doing wild feminist art. I mean, the Guerrilla Girls were 15 years later than this early stuff in 1970 or so. And so in the West Coast, they were much more confrontational with, bringing much better issues in and so on. We finally got there. But that was a big difference because New York was heavily art world.
But we weren't in California. There was no real art world except Billy L. Bankston and, you know, a few of the guys, Ed Ruscha. But there basically was... Nobody aspired to galleries. Nobody aspired to, well, teaching jobs were going to help you.
Some people aspired.
but like besides Judy, you mean?
Well, besides Judy, yeah.
I think what I'm talking about is there was a gang of younger women artists, and we came out of Cal Arts. We came out of the different schools.
She's almost 9 years younger than I am, so we should...
Yeah, so they came, well, but I also went to school a little later. I'd gone to other schools, but basically there was a whole the group she's talking about that were crazy were not the Ruth Weisbergs and the women from, Rachel Rosenthal was there. She was a little wacky, but it was the performance artists, young women performance artists got together and they did a lot of things, like Leslie Labowitz would do these things that looked exactly like protests. She had come back from being in Germany with Boyce and joined up with women in Los Angeles. So a lot of that sort of energy you're talking about came from people who didn't have much art training, you know, and they were younger, they were students, and they didn't have much to lose.
Yeah.
You know, it never occurred to me that galleries were something that you might aspire to.
Well, in New York, of course, it was the art world, and we knew we were fighting the big guys and all of museums and the magazines. I mean, you had to edit I self-censored when I was writing for Art in America or Art Forum or whatever, because I couldn't be the feminist I really was. Mm-hmm. They knew who I was, and they knew what I might say if they would let me, but they didn't. And so then we started Heresies in 1976, and it was 77, the first issue. And I thought, oh, I can finally say what I want to say. And because Heresies was, we were contentious. We argued about everything, and half the meetings people were in tears and we were enraged or something. But we worked together really wonderfully, and you could get to say what you wanted to.
On the West Coast, they had Chrysalis, so Heresies, Chrysalis, and Chrysalis. I don't think people fought that much. They were literate, and I think it was really driven by design a lot, as much
we
as
were
art.
a very multicultural, not too multicultural, actually.
I think the other big difference was that at the Women's Building, you were basically within an all-women's community and all women's businesses, and you weren't thinking about, I want to be on La Cienega Gallery, in a La Cienega Gallery. You were really focused on that community, and I think we developed an enduring relationship structure that doesn't exist with younger women. And I teach, and I feel very badly for a lot of the younger women that I even still teach. They don't have the experience of that community. And that community still exists. If you look at Nancy Buchanan, Barbara Smith, Leslie Labowitz, there's this age group of women who grew up together and who learned. You were talking about thinking you were one of the boys. Of course, I did too. But I learned and trained myself when I was a feminist. There would be a man standing here talking and a woman, and I would always talk to the man. I was in the sciences anyway, and I would always talk to the man. And I remember just training myself to look at women. And that's what it was like. Ambitious, aggressive women were identified with men.
We had a real community in New York, but it was it was coming from very different, we were mostly older, and we had consciousness raising groups and so on. I mean, one woman who shall be nameless, who's now quite famous, Max Kozloff was an editor of Art Forum briefly, and his wife Joyce is a wonderful artist and wonderful feminist. And I said to Max, let me write a whole series, every issue of something on a woman artist. And he said, no, we don't want featurettes. I mean, from Max, I was horrified. I mean, Joyce had him trained better later, but it was. Anyway, I can't remember where I was going with that.
Scene. I didn't know Sol LeWitt, but I met Nancy Sparrow and Rudolph Berenek and a lot of
May
people.
Stevenson lived around the corner from me. We had a real community.
Yeah.
And we still do. I mean, a lot of us are dead now because we were older, but
they're still having community.
Yeah. Yes.
So semantics. Let's talk a little bit about semantics. Did you ever think about what it meant to call yourself a feminist?
Not really. I mean, once I was calling myself a feminist, I was a feminist.
And it was okay.
Yeah. I mean, I've always enjoyed a certain amount of confrontation. So.
A certain amount.
But years later, the Museum of Modern Art finally pulled themselves together and did a feminist thing it was in 90 or somewhere. I mean, it was really maybe late 80s, but and young women would come up to me and say, well, I'm not a feminist. I don't call myself a feminist, but I'm a strong woman and I stand up for myself. And I would say, well, feminists stand up for all women, not just yourself. And this is a huge difference to me. I mean, I don't think people understand that.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I always understood about feminism was it wasn't just about women.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, feminism was about a particular kind of discrimination. And that could be people of color, that could be class-based, and I know you've gotten into in your writings a lot, not only feminism, but class and ethnicity and race.
But of course, heresies and all of the groups we started didn't have enough diversity, equity, and inclusion in them, and we got a lot of hassle from that, and we were guilty of that. We'd start something, and then we'd say, "Oh, we should have some women of color," you know, but we didn't start things with the women of color in the 70s, and that was a real mistake. I mean, it was we worked with heresies, did 2 or 3 race issues and so forth.
I also think that.
And they were edited all by the group themselves, not by heresies. The Mother Collective, we called ourselves. So.
I also think that it's not, the slight difference on the East Coast and the West Coast among women, you know, I think New York feminists set the stage for what people thought feminism was. And a lot of those women were college educated, middle class, scholarly
and
women.
white, yeah.
And that is still, and that was not what was going on in LA. Definitely there were more white women, but there was a lot of people I know that were doing, including me, doing really, really interdisciplinary, interracial work.
But that was in the 80s, more or less.
No, I started in the 70s.
I
was in Watts
late
through
70s,
the 70s. Yeah. No, all through the 70s, the mid-70s. But the point is, there was, if you really look into it, which I have, well, I grew up through it, there is a group of artists, Nobuko Miyamoto, you know, in the Japanese community, in the farm immigrant community, there was artists that found each other. Black artists, Now Dig This is all about that sort of heritage. So, but that is not seen. When I've done works like in New York, I did a project on feminism and activism, trying to look at back to semantics. You know, young women who are activists now, I don't understand that they often don't call themselves feminists. I was curious about what that meant to them. And I actually had some New York very activist young women say to me, you know, you got the feminist movement was all white and middle class.
Which it wasn't.
No, it wasn't.
No.
So I think one of the differences, because we were out of anything having to do with the art world, and you had a lot of established women artists you were working with, and the ones we were working with
most of them were not really established yet. I mean, sort of,
I
mean,
well,
we didn't have any
established.
famous women artists in heresies, for instance. People since then have gotten to be better known. But
so activism and feminism. How do you think about that?
Well, I became an activist through feminism. So, I mean, I was in the Art Workers Coalition in the late 60s, so I was becoming an activist and so on, but it didn't occur to me. I mean, there was a group in the Art Workers Coalition which was very sloppily organized. We could do anything we wanted. Nobody could tell us. We'd have a committee. We'd say, well, we're the committee to do this, and everybody else would go, oh, okay. And so, but there was
that was very early, wasn't it? What,
it was 69.
Yeah,
it started, but it wasn't that early. But where was I going with this? But there was a group called WAR, Women Artists in Revolution, and they were not well-known artists at all. I mean, they were really not in the art world at all. Some of my friends tried to be in the art world, or were getting into the art world, or whatever. But they didn't. The museums wouldn't listen to them because they didn't have any. They were less known and so on. When we started Ad Hoc Women Artists Committee, which is a klutzy name, we would have been more interesting if we had a better name. But we were just focused on the Whitney, and so when we got to them. I mean, we did a fake press release that said, purported to be by the director of the Whitney, saying, "Oh, we're going to have 50% women and 50% women of color and people of color, not just women." And this thing went out, and we had asked a lawyer if this was something we could do, and he said, yeah. But he didn't tell us that if you used somebody's name, it was libel. So, and luckily we were doing this pretty anonymously, but Poppy Johnson was 19 at the time, and a real spark plug. So anyway, they came to her first. They knocked on her door, figuring we'll get this kid to talk and to send it. And they said, and she said, do I have to talk to you? And they said, well, no, because they didn't have a warrant or whatever. She said, well, fuck off. And so that was it. I mean, she called us and we said, okay, we don't have to talk to them either. But there was a whole thing about using people's names.
I always loved that project. I'm not project, but the kind of project at the Whitney that you did. What year was that?
That was 1970. That was the Whitney stuff. I mean,
So you didn't burn bras?
no, we didn't wear bras.
No.
I didn't anyway. We would, when you were lecturing on feminism around the country, there was always some guy who stood up and said something like, "Why aren't you wearing a bra?" or some sappy thing. And I'd say afterwards, "Who the hell was that?" And they'd say, "Oh, he's a sculptor." So I started saying, "Are you a sculptor?"
I was sitting with my boyfriend on a fireplace at Judy Chicago's house, and we were both wearing Bermuda shorts, and she walked by, and then she went, "Suzanne, your legs are as hairy as his." The other thing we didn't do was shave our legs or underarms.
Yes.
Anything, what are you up to now, I guess? I'm curious. What are you writing?
Weren't we going to do something else in between there? I can't remember what it was.
It was social practice.
Yeah, I was going to, because I always think of Suzanne as sort of inventing social practice, but she invented new genre, and we don't know who did the phrase social.
What we were going to talk about was the way in which language, both of us write. Obviously, she writes much better and much more, but we were thinking about how. Of what import is the word, is the label. And when I wrote New Genre Public Art, it was an attempt to expand the boundaries of what artists could make, and it could be seen differently. And that came out of a conference I did in San Francisco that Lucy was one of, I think, 25 speakers. Each of you got 3 minutes to stand up. And it was a sort of a performative conference. But we went away to a retreat, about 20 of us, people like Alan Capro and Lynn Hirschman and Mel Chin, we all went away, and then we started strategizing how to take the newly evolving ideas of public art and change them into more of a public practice. In other words, we compared, and then at the end of the book, Lucy has an essay in it. It's filled with essays, and I edited all of them, and I still remember that the only person that said to me, "I'm not editing a word. You take it the way it is, or don't take it."
Yeah. I'm not fond of copy editors. My apologies if there's a copy editor in the audience. But
Yeah. So
I was a copy editor at one point.
So she was saying, this word social practice is what I'm sort of less seen as a feminist and more in this category of performative kind of transient practice in public. And for me, it's irrelevant. I wrote a book that we all decided we would call Mapping the Terrain, but it doesn't there's no such thing as mapping the terrain art. And people do approach me and say, "That art form that you invented," I'm not like, no. That is a word that leads us to the next word that leads us to the next word.
But I've personally disliked the social practice. It sounds clinical to me. I don't have a practice. People say, "What is your practice?" I say, "I don't have one." I mean, but because it really sounds too clinical for art.
Yeah, it is.
I like new genre better. I mean,
it is. Well, people call it socially engaged art. We used to call it community-based art. I travel a lot, and there's these forms of art that really change form over time, depending on what's happening in the major art world. But they're basically the language, like Borio wrote. What was his? Remember? Relational Aesthetics. We all read the book and looked at it and said, "I wish I'd thought of that title." But he wasn't talking about the same kind of art. So you could say we're all doing socially engaged art, or you could say, social practice, or you could say social art practice. And I think the word practice, oddly, came from psychology, and I don't know who developed that idea, but it is the word I use now for what I do.
I just don't use it.
And it does involve a kind of clinical, in this way, I think to do social practice, to do socially based art, you really have to look at other things that artists aren't normally looking at.
Yeah, but
I do a power assessment whenever I go into a place and, figure out where sources of power are for an entire city, like in Quito, for example. And we'll work for 2 years analyzing where power lies and how to organize within that environment. And
But she came out of psychology too, so that's
yeah, but that is practice.
Yeah.
That is a practice.
still too clinical.
Okay, so that was the thing. That was the thing that we were going to do. But I was going to ask you, what now? What are you doing?
Well, I used to say I came to New Mexico 33 years ago to get away from art, and my artist friends were like, and so I said,
And then they all came to visit her.
and so then I'd say, no, not art. I'd get away from the art world, because I have a lot of artist friends, some of whom are here. So thank you. But I haven't been involved in I know it sounds funny to say, because I'm still writing about art and artists, but they're not famous artists. I much prefer to write about the first essay on somebody or other. I'm not discovering anybody, because they're there and they're already doing stuff, but I like to, and I've written a lot about Native American stuff now, and my publisher at the New Press at one point, I wrote a book called, which is where I met my partner, because we'd both done books on natives and photography. But anyway, I did this thing called Partial Recall, which was essays by native artists and native writers and artists and so forth. And it was a breakthrough to be able to do something like that. I was going somewhere with this. I guess the book Overlay, which I wrote after living in England for a year, was my real breakthrough, where I realized I didn't always have to write about art as such. If I was interested in something, I could always find artists who were interested in it too. So I would get off on something, and then I'd look around and there'd be millions of artists who are doing interesting work around that. So that's kind of where I've gone since then, is I realized I could get out of the art world by writing about other stuff.
And what are you doing right now? What's your
Right now. Well,
project?
I'm trying to slow down. I'm not trying to slow down. I'm slowing down, thanks to the age and so on. But I've got a book. I'm not taking on a lot of stuff, because I'm trying to finish a book. I have to tell you this part of the story. I was visiting Terry Reeb, who's an artist who's off and on in Galisteo, and she had a friend who was a Colombian drag queen, and he was a nice guy, and he had no idea who I was or what I did. And he said, I want to do your tarot. And so I said, okay. And he said, what's the question? And I said, well, am I going to live long enough to do another book? Because that's my favorite medium. And so he did the tarot thing, and he said, yes, you have 8 or 9 years. And that was 2 or 3 years ago, so. So I thought, well, okay, I'll do another book. And it really was from that conversation that I thought I could do another book.
And what is...
And the book is called The Burden of Memory. I always get the title first before I write anything, and sometimes the design, and before the words are really coming. But
Of course, the interesting thing is, as we get older, we have less burden of memory.
yes, the lack of memory. But anyways, and then this was before Trump was reelected. So now I was going to do something on monuments, but there were 2 or 3 good books on monuments, coupled by friends and so on. So I thought I won't do monuments as such. I'll do history, because now they're just denying history, everything. I mean, it's just, we all know what that's about. But so it's going to be about working with artists who are, working with history or doing monuments, and monuments being in a very broad sense, like descansos.
Then you need to come to LA, because MoCA just opened.
Yeah, I know, this is the Kara Walker thing.
So you should come visit, yeah. It's actually kind of a brilliant show.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
So I think that one of the things that I'm most curious about, and I'm not really sure how to introduce it as a topic particularly, but it's this, she's looking at me like, are you going to surprise me? No, I'm not. It's kind of the idea of the local politics and community and global politics. I watch news like practically 24 hours a day. Not really, but 12. And I'm really connected to what's happening in other countries, and I know you are as well. But it's interesting to me that we've got this sort of exhibition that is, it's the manifestation of a very specific set of relationships that you've had within the art community, broadly speaking, and that you've focused also so much energy on this very local community in Galisteo, and I know you're involved with the politics there. I mean, how do you think about, because I know you must have had some very clear reasons that you were going to do that.
No,
You
I don't
didn't
have
just
clear
land
reasons.
there.
People are always asking me what my methodology is, and I say one thing leads to another. I'm very unanalytical. Suzanne is the opposite of this one. But I wrote a book called, I was here already when I finished it. I wrote a book called The Lure of the Local. And then I thought, well, I better practice what I preach. And so I did. I mean, so I moved into this very small community. There are 250 people in Galisteo, but a lot of them are very interesting. So.
Okay, but practice what you preach implies that you had underneath an ethic that you wanted to see.
Well, I'd always liked community things, but I didn't want the community to be the art world.
No, obviously, but it's interesting. How do you think about impact and effectiveness? I mean, this is part of political debate now.
Well, I mean, we're a group of us are trying to get going on starting a sort of anti-capitalist art discussion group or activist group or whatever, and we're calling it Impact Art Lab. So, the impact is the important part of it. Jim and I, when the Iraq War happened, we Xeroxed just 8 by 10 Xeroxes of Iraqi people, no text, just the faces, children, men, women, everybody, and plastered them up and down Canyon Road, and they were gone in a day. Because you're not apparently allowed to do that on Canyon Road. I mean, we should have been smarter about that. But we want to reach out of the art world and make some kind of impact. I don't know what kind of impact art. I always say that art itself doesn't make that much of an impact, but with the right allies, we can do a lot. Because so many people don't know what to do with art, but when art gets involved, like Peggy Diggs is right over there. Oh, she did an amazing piece of stop me if I'm getting this wrong.
The milk carton?
Milk cartons about domestic violence. And that's something that went way, way out of the art world, and that's the kind of thing I like to see happening. It's not about putting more activist art up. And H+H, Heather Fraser Smith has a little space in back of the galleries in Canyon Road. And so she's given us some space to do something from them. But there's this thing that's called Fall of Freedom that Dred Scott and Jenny Pollack and a bunch of people are putting together. It's a national thing, and I love the double entendre of the fall of freedom. It's the fall, and it's also the fall, and so forth. So we're going to try to do something on November 21st and 22nd around that.
Just keep that in mind, you might be mobbed.
No, we've got a long list of people who want to be involved, so, which is nice. Which is great.
I think that we should, and maybe...
I was going to ask you what you're doing now.
I just finished a project on women in soccer, and I'm doing a lot of video installation, a 5-screen video installation with young women soccer players from LA and from Manchester, England, and it just showed in Manchester. And I'm not really interested in sports particularly, and I spent a year researching this stuff and learning about it, and I sort of take in information, and then it comes out as a set of political ideas and visual images. And in this case, I was very struck by the way they experience, maybe later than us, but the same things. They experience the violence, the workplace harassment. Women soccer players are more likely to be assaulted by their fans than men soccer players, and so on. So what was interesting to me is you've got these iconic figures of strong women that have got to be changing the way we see women. And as soccer and women's sports gains ascendance, there's this interesting, for me, kind of shift between what is a woman and what these women represent. Mm-hmm. And that made it okay for me to spend a year dealing with soccer. So that's one of the things that I'm doing. But I've been doing a lot of exhibitions and rethinking old work and how do you make a thing, an object out of it since, as you said. And I'm also thinking about redoing this project I did in 75, maybe, called Cinderella in a Dragster. And I'm going to become the world's fastest 80-year-old feminist performance artist. Which you can do, because if you create a very narrow category. So what I would love to do is invite people to ask questions, but first, I would love to see everybody that we know that has kind of participated in this history just stand up, like Peggy. Could you just for a minute, Mario? Could you just for a minute? I just want to see how many of you are really out here.
Yeah, and there's some shy ones who are not standing up too. And before we do the questions stuff, I meant to start with this. Thank Alexandra Terry, because the show is hers.
Right.
I mean, people say it's my show, it's really her show.
Well, I couldn't have done it without you, not only because of the objects, but me pestering you for 2 years about information, where this came from, who was this artist, and really it all came from you, Lucy. And I've told this story, but I arrived here 2 years ago, and it was when I realized that Lucy was in the community and that I would be entering the space without Lucy in touch. I was present, and I was absolutely floored. And so just the honor that I feel having been able to work with you and with these beautiful objects, and having Suzanne here tonight is such a blessing. So thank you both.
I also want just one more little thing. I want to thank Mary Scully, who was the curator, because she because she and I talked about doing an artist book show for years and never did it. And then so Alexandra ended up with it. So but it was Mary's thing too.
So this is for Lucy. And Lucy, you did a talk with Harmony Hammond for our exhibit Women's Work at Lyndhurst, which is a historic house museum of the National Trust. So it's nice to meet you. In your non-collection, you have an artist, Hannah Wilkie, who I love and I think is under-recognized. And I wonder if you could talk about her a little bit and whether you, Hannah Wilkie, and whether you think women artists are still under-recognized.
Yeah, well, they sure are, because so many people I came up with are in their 80s now, or they're dead, and they're finally being recognized. I mean, it would be nice to have that happen when you're in your 30s or 40s, or 50s even, rather than that part of it. I didn't miss the what was the Harmony part?
Just that you did a talk.
Yeah.
You did a talk for Women's Work, our exhibit.
Harmony is the one who got me to Galisteo. Harmony and Judy Chicago got me to Galisteo, and so we're old pals, and she was in Heresies, and so anyway,
I think he also wanted to know about Hannah Wilkie, and I don't think she was unrecognized.
Hannah Wilkie was not unrecognized,
No.
and nor was she a feminist.
Yeah, exactly.
we had she called Heresies Marxist feminists and disliked most of it. She said, none of you are beautiful like she was. And I certainly couldn't claim to be, but we had beautiful women in Heresies. Yeah. And it was, she was annoying. I mean, she did. My dog is a female dog, and she doesn't like other female dogs. And I was walking her, and somebody in Galisteo, I said to her, I'm sorry, she doesn't like other females. She's not a feminist. And this woman said, feminists don't like all women.
We have a question here about High Performance Magazine, Linda Burnham.
In fact, this year, there was a feminist, I'm not sure she called herself a feminist either, but a critic writer who started a magazine in the 70s. And I think I was actually the first cover girl as Cinderella in a Dragster. And they published performance art, and particularly performance art from the West Coast, but then they expanded out and did work, on ethnic issues and so on, and ecological issues. And interestingly enough, high performance is going to be celebrated all next year in LA with a project that the Getty's doing.
Well, performance art was interesting because in New York, I mean, it was one thing that conceptual art and performance art, the art world hadn't picked it up yet, hadn't really acknowledged famous people in it. So it was a place that women could come in, a little kind of hole that we could go through and so on. So a lot of performance artists were feminists, yeah. And it was a feminist thing. So.
Hi there, it's Beverly.
Yeah, hi Beverly, how are you?
I have a question for both of you. So Suzanne and I met in a show that Lucy curated in London back in 1980 called Issue. I don't remember the rest of the
Issue, yeah.
And it was women artists, activist artists. Mm-hmm. And I'm just curious how many of the people that you've curated over the years have stuck in the art world or have created new kinds of paradigms for artists to work in community outside of the shadow of the commercial art world.
Well, you have, of course, and among other people, but...
Yeah. Do you have other people?
This is the kind of question that I go blank on. I can never remember anybody's name or whatever. I mean, Suzanne, obviously, and I mean, they're just, you want to answer that?
I think what you're getting at is what kinds of models have been invented.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of women and a lot of people of color who have invented models that are being used now.
Shifting the paradigm.
They've shifted it, but it hasn't disconnected itself from the art market. Mm-hmm. So it sort of shifted what you can do. Mapping the terrain was basically an attempt to create a new paradigm for people who worked in community and aligned with not so much the gallery system, but what the gallery system at that point represented. It represents a lot more now. It's a lot more overbearing. But I mean, I know people like Pedro Reyes, who's a good friend, and Rick Lowe, who turned into a painter, Project Row Houses. So, you know, Pedro is very successful at doing social practice and making objects. But to create an object out of a social practice is not so easy. It can become very exploitative. Actually.
Well, I think, you know, the book that I'm writing right now is about creative emergent strategies. So it's looking at things that don't orient towards the art world at all, but they're about creating cultural activism in communities that raise consciousness and tell stories so that people don't lose history and don't lose a sense of power in relation to the fascist state that we live in now.
And there's a broader, I mean, culture is a broader thing than art, unfortunately. Right. So that's something to think about.
Well, I think you should, if you don't know her already, connect with Jody Evans, one of the co-founders of Code Pink. She is an activist who uses artistic methodologies, and she'd be a very good person to consult with. Okay. They're those pink ladies that show up in congressional meetings and start screaming about Palestine at the back of the room.
This is for Lucy. Has to do with critical distance. Right, both geographic and disciplinary, I guess. So I mean,
Mario, talk louder.
So critical distance, right? Yeah, I mean, it seems like you've been trying to maintain an outsider's relationship to the art world, to some extent, right? You've moved out here. Your disciplinary approach is not a traditional, say, art historical approach. So I have one question about that is, how strategic has that been? Like, have you been very calculated about the distance that you maintain? The other question has to do with the show shows these relationships that you've had over the years that define a lot of these positive dynamics that you've had. I'm just wondering about the negative dynamics. Like, you don't have stuff there. There isn't stuff from folks you've burned bridges with for example?
Well, I don't know. I mean, never mind.
Go.
Well, I mean, I think showing Carl Andre's work, I think you were right in the middle of having a relationship with Carl and with, we both went to Cuba with Anna, and so we were close, all of us. And I think that there was a division of politics, interests, I don't know, but I think that was not critical distance. But if I can answer for her.
Do, because I didn't really grasp that other.
Well, he's asking how calculated and strategic is your attempt to be in or out of the art world.
Yeah.
And I would say that she doesn't think that way.
Yeah.
I might think that way. She doesn't think that way.
I just kind of fall into things. I mean, I don't make decisions, but certainly, I'm very influenced by friends. I mean, relationships are. John Quick to See Smith was a friend. I met through Harmony Hammond because they did the Women of Sweetgrass, Cedar, and Sage in 1982 or something like that. Anyway, and I was in New York and I didn't know anything about Native art. Period. There was the American Indian Community House. Briefly had a gallery in the same building as Leo Castelli, which was like wild. But I went in and looked at things, and then Jolene Rickard and I'm losing it. Anyway, Jolene Rickard and Peter Jemison were partners at that time, and they were running that gallery. And so they said to me, "You don't know anything about Native art, do you?" And I said, "No. How would I? I mean, there really wasn't around. This was before I'd written Mixed Blessings and so on." And they just took me in hand and bloody well educated me. And then I met John through Harmony, and I came down here in Ramona Sekestawa and started, getting educated. And that's where most of my stuff comes from, is friends know more than I do about something, and so I get to know about it. So it's not very strategic. It's just sort of have a drink and start talking.
Hi.
Sorry, I know that didn't really answer your question, but
I don't want to stand up because I'll be in front of the camera, but my question is kind of twofold about the word feminist. Like growing up, I feel like it was appropriated by the patriarchy, making a meaning of a man-hater, right? So a lot of young girls I know won't call themselves feminists, but they are feminists. And now as we break the language with the binary, and there's now non-binaries, how do you feel like the non-binary trans movement affects feminism?
Do you want to?
well, I mean, I'm having trouble hearing with the things, but
how does things like the trans movement affect feminism? And I would say that feminism, I teach, so I work with young people all over, and I did a project in Brooklyn with the Sackler Museum and Creative Time. We spent a year organizing activist women and a few men, as they pointed out. It was now time for them to be included as well. And we had organizations, 160 organizations, I think it was. They each contributed a small group who would sit in the middle on a stoop in Brooklyn and talk simultaneously about what it meant for them to work together, to be together. My question was, do you guys consider yourself feminists? And it was interesting that in my experience working with a team of women, young women, their notion had changed a lot. And I remember them saying the trans movement is the most, they were from Barnard, a couple of them, and this was huge on college campuses. And I said, well, see that woman out there? It was an old Chinese woman pushing a big cart and picking up stuff. I said, do you think she thinks about trans issues? Is that her most important issue? And it wasn't to put them down. It was to widen the bandwidth. So I know a lot of young women who, all of my students, they think, I had a Korean student who worked who came to Los Angeles, and she said, I don't understand it. None of these students want to hear about feminism, and they think that I'm kind of retrograde. And they didn't know what feminism was in Korea. And I had worked there, and I did know that she was making a very brave kind of statement with her work. And but I think that the thing that we're experiencing now with the woke movement stuff, I don't have a problem with woke, but I do think that things like, I've seen the hegemony of trans or queer or performance or all of these things get expressed in college art programs. And
just the use of the word is changing. We were talking about that, how you can be queer without being queer. I mean,
Yeah, without being sexually queer.
Yeah, sexually. And I have a friend who said, I've discovered I am a queer asexual. So I thought, okay. I mean,
that doesn't make any sense to you. So I guess my other point was we have to be open to changes in experience. And I've always been very curious about how younger women, I had a project once where I had younger women come and go through my archives. And then I said, tell me what you picked out, why you've selected it. And they would tell me, and I would just look at them like I wouldn't tell them, no, you're wrong. No, it's not that. It wasn't like that. I just let them, pick it out and interpret it. And I think that if any of our age, one of the things we did not do enough was communicate to younger women. So that's kind of a lot of things about that. There's somebody over here.
But I really admire the flexibility of the non-binary stuff that's going on. I mean, we just when I was starting out, we just didn't know about that. It hadn't been invented yet, and it's really. I mean, there were trans people, obviously, and so on, but.
Well, and I could say a lot more about that because I think trans women are some of the people that experience the most violence in the world.
Oh, yeah.
So there's lots of issues about that. Did you?
Hi, yeah. The Nigerian writer Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie wrote a text called "We Should All Be Feminists," and
I'll be what?
we should all be
women.
feminists.
Where are you? Can you?
I'm right here.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Sorry. Anyway, I just wanted to, because we have been talking a lot about the power structure and about the changes politically. The idea of expanding what a feminist is through art, through visual art, through music, through performance, through writing, I think is really important. And I wanted to know how you think we can promote that in our present society, which is much more restrictive. And as someone else had mentioned, fascist.
Our present society, meaning the Trumpian administration, or just generally?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Would that be local or global?
The global, I suppose. I mean,
No, I'm just curious how you would respond to that.
I'm not getting these questions
Okay,
well.
all right.
Sorry.
Do you want to offer it again?
No, just go ahead and talk. You talk.
Have anything to say about it?
The idea, I'm sorry, the idea of being a feminist, it can be expanded, I think, beyond what it has seemed to be in our society. When we're talking about people who say, oh, feminism, it's old, it's, I guess the idea I'm trying to get across is that we should all be feminists. All of us, men included, women hold up half the sky and probably a little more than our own half of the sky. But how can we, as musicians, as writers, as artists, how can we combat the rise of a more traditional, you might say, trad wife kind of vision that is happening in the United States right now? I mean, I think Even my dog sits next to a pillow that says feminist, 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 feminist. So how can we expand that to combat the notions that are happening in the United States right now? And I think globally too, but I think it's really people are being indoctrinated in this country.
I don't think there's a real answer to that, because artists are the ones who come up with something. I mean, it's something we've never thought of before. Artists can give a jolt, which I really love, visually and politically and so forth. I mean, we don't know what the best way to do it is until some artist comes up and does something terrific, and then we say, oh, and then she may have followers, or some other artist will come up and do something amazing. But it's not something predetermined. I don't think it's a specific plan. It's what comes out of the art.
I think we should sort of begin to wind down. Is there any desperate last questions?
Is it? Oh.
There's a desperate one in the back.
I've got the mic. You mentioned the Women's Building in Los Angeles a few times. So I was a student in the late 70s, and I worked with you, Suzanne, in fact, with a group of students on a float that participated in Women Take Back the Night March, and it was a Virgin and the Whore. And I'm thinking this conversation is bringing me back to that time. It's all becoming very vivid. And I'm wondering, what happened to the Women's Building?
Let me say first, what was your name?
Rosemary Prinz.
Oh my God.
You stayed at my house.
I knew that when I was watching you down there, and I knew you, and I can't believe it. Yes, we worked very closely together. You were amazing. The Women's Building is no longer existing. It is a physical structure. They've made it into a National Heritage Site, but they haven't figured out what to do with it.
Who's they?
They being the people who, well, a lot of people are talking about, can it become a performance art museum? Can it become this? Can it become that? But it has to do with money. It's an old building, but the building still exists. The Sherry Galkey is doing a doing a film on acting like women, which is the performance art movement. And there are books and stuff that come out, but anyway.
But when did it stop being the Women's Building? Years ago, wasn't it?
I think it was before 1980.
Yeah.
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 I thought there was a desperate plea from the back, and then we should stop.
The desperate.
No desperation. Can you hear me?
No.
I can.
I got to get hearing aids. I've been saying that for a long time.
Hi, Suzanne, it's Tressa. So I just wanted to ask you about what next after, we won't say social practice, then what next? Because, you may know for the last few years, one of the things I've been doing here in New Mexico is working with next-gen self-identified feminists that came through the 50th anniversary of the Woman House Project in Belen. Yeah. So finding that working with a lot of the younger artists, that there's no real desire to go to New York or LA. So this kind of bi-coastal dichotomy that was set up early on in the art world for all the reasons that you and Lucy have been talking about, I wonder to what extent social practice has helped to kind of break down those monoliths and allowed us a more kind of nodal and webbed worked and harking back even to community-based practices.
Well, the great thing about young people is they're always interested in social justice. I mean, not every young person, but what I'm seeing now in school looks a lot like when I was in school. And I think that that basically right now we are, the best thing we can do, I think, well, other than join the poor people's movement, is that Benjamin, what's his name? Benjamin Barber, Reverend Barber, William Barber. But other than joining a movement, I think is working
The
with young.
Moral Mondays. Yeah.
Yeah, I think is working with young people. And I think we have to work with young people. I mean, we have to be involved with them because they are the next generation. They are going to be the feminists of tomorrow.
My grandson is at Ithaca College and is a filmmaker. And he and his wonderful girlfriend, who's Argentine, made a film called Jacking Off, and it's not. It's about two people named Jackie. It's a long, involved thing, but and it's based in a psychology class in school, and so Peter Biskind, who used to be a big, still is a big film writer and so on, is a friend. And so I sent it, I looked at it and I thought, well, there's a little too much, you never see any bodies jacking off at all. It's a fascinating film, but I didn't quite get it. So I sent it to Peter and he said, I didn't get it either. So we asked Calvin, my grandson, and he said, I think it's a generational thing. And I think it is. I mean, they did a beautiful job on the film, but we didn't get it. And but his counterparts at Ithaca College seemed to get it. So
You've been a great audience and very attentive. Thank you so much for coming. Okay, go down and meet your friends.